Welcome to Venezuela Insider, the only place in Venezuela for expats, digital nomads, entrepreneurs, investors, travelers, and related internationals. For more information, venezuelainsider.com. Today we have a very interesting video. I'm reacting to the ideas and the opinions of very renowned economist Steve Hanke. He's a PhD on economics, he's a college professor on Johns Hopkins University, is very renowned worldwide on the economic world, especially regarding currency and commodities. His specialty is currency boards that, let's say, fixes the currency on a dreadful economy. He's done that. He has participated on a bunch of these currency boards worldwide and is making the case to establish one of those here in Venezuela. The main thing is that Professor Hanke was hired by a presidential candidate here in Venezuela, Roberto Enriquez. He comes from the political party that is a flagship political party on the 20th century called COPEI, and he's a pre-presidential candidate, and of course he's making this very special political and economic project for the country. However, I'm going to explain at the end of the video why it's not happening. So he hired Professor Hanke in order to design such economic project in order to fix the Venezuelan economy. So we are going to start explaining what is Professor Hanke project for Venezuela. So Professor Hanke starts describing the Venezuelan economy. He talks that the Venezuelan economy has 1,000 problems, and I can agree with that. But the center of the problem is the currency, and I disagree with that. I'll explain later. Inflation is very high, of course I agree with that, and the Bolivar, the value of the Bolivar has been destroyed 80% just on the past few years and has suffered 2 episodes of hyperinflation, which I don't agree is just one big episode of hyperinflation, that we might see what is considered hyperinflation maybe this year, but I don't think that just on this year. Well, and according to the misery index that Professor Hanke himself develops, Venezuela is just second behind Zimbabwe, that of course is always very high on this misery index. Well, I agree with Professor Hanke regarding the 1,000 problems on the Venezuelan economy. The main one is the currency. However, I disagree with that because since 2018, the Venezuelan economy has been de facto dollarized, so the inflation rate measured on bolivars is meaningless, is pointless at this moment. So any transaction, the reference, the standard is the USD. And the other thing he mentions is that he wants to fix the Bolivar. I disagree, I respectfully disagree with a PhD on economics that is a specialist on currencies. For my take, I would prefer just a peg to the USD or just straight out dollarize the economy officially, just like other countries in Latin America like Ecuador, Panama, and El Salvador did, and the real wages have increased since each of these economies had been dollarized. So, well, but still want to keep reviewing what the professor has to say. And of course, the solution, according to him, is a currency board, which I don't disagree with a currency board. And what a currency board means is that it's like a, let's say, a temporary institution that will replace the Central Bank of Venezuela, which is dreadful how the central bank is managed, and the bolivars, the Venezuelan currency, will be pegged to the USD. And the bolivars issue beginning the currency board, will be 100% banked by the same amount of US dollars. So on that regard, I will agree, because according to Professor Hanke, he doesn't like that an economy and a currency of any given economy is tied to the monetary policy of an outside economy, in this case the United States, because even in the United States there could be inclined to take very bad monetary policies, and until a certain degree, that's what happened during the CARES Act and COVID and the quote-unquote the Federal Reserve, the Fed, that is the equivalent of a central bank on the United States, just printed a lot of money, but that's just another discussion. But just to keep up with Mr. Professor Hanke's opinion, is creating a currency board. I wouldn't disagree, however, I just prefer straight out dollarizing the Venezuelan economy. Now, Professor Hanke also has a very interesting take regarding the sanctions on the Venezuelan economy. He is all for eliminating every sanction immediately from the Venezuelan economy, and actually he has spoken with high-ranked officials on both the Trump administration and also, I believe, the Biden administration regarding that. There is the sanctions, according to Professor Hanke, that are the main reason that Maduro is in power. I disagree with that take, but sanctions are stupid and don't work, and I agree with that. Because what happens with sanctions, of course, they are a kind of an inconvenience for the local government, in this case like Maduro, and on the case in Russia with Putin and so on and so on, but they affect the most to the average citizens of any given population that is suffering sanctions. So you have to take into account. According to Professor Hanke, you create elites within economies that are sanctioned economies, especially by the United States, and the poor get poorer, and I agree with that. However, the sanctions here, and this is just my take, not the Professor Hanke's take, is that the U.S. sanctions on the Venezuelan economy didn't destroy the Venezuelan economy. It was corruption and political and economic mismanagement of the people on top. So we have to blame the government. It's no way the government can escape onto that plane, because the economic destruction on Venezuela was measured between 2012 and 2018. I always say the bottom of the situation was on 2018. That's the first time that I just, okay, there will be on the near future solutions for what we've been through just the past decade. Very good. So the sanctions started officially on 2015 against individual people that worked on the Maduro administration, and that was during the Obama administration. Of course, they were very pushed by Republicans, also by Democrats, but Republicans on the Congress, Marco Rubio, I don't remember this Cuban-American congresswoman, Ileana Ros-Lehtman, I believe that's the name. Also Bob Melendez, that is a Democrat, and many other people on Congress and the government. But Marco Rubio has the biggest, the senator of Florida. Very good. And what happened is, after that was during the Obama administration ended on 2017, and that's when the Trump administration, that he's a Republican, it is harder with these left-leaning regimes like we had in Venezuela. So he even threatened to make a military operation here. That of course didn't happen. However, he sanctioned the Trump administration sanctions were stronger against the individuals on the Venezuelan economy. However, late 2018, early 2019, the whole Venezuelan economy was sanctioned regarding oil trade and such. And that didn't collapse the Venezuelan economy, just make it difficult to make a comeback, and still is making a comeback. However, since the Biden administration, he has relaxed a little bit the sanctions against Venezuela. For something that happened during the Trump administration is that he banned basically direct flights between Venezuela and the United States, and we still have those bans. However, many airlines overpassed such ban by making a scale on Dominican Republic and Panama City. Very good. The main takeaway here is that the sanctions didn't destroy the economy. It's making it harder to go back again and grow back again the economy. That's the key, the issue with the sanctions. So it's not the sanctions fault to the crisis. However, it's the sanctions fault that many Venezuelan individuals don't have access to the U.S. market, because the private companies are a little bit scared that they can be sanctioned as well if they do business with a Venezuelan entity. I'm talking average Venezuelan entrepreneurs, not the government. So that's what I don't like the sanctions. But according to, yet again, Professor Hanke, he says that the reason that Maduro is in power, no, that's not the reason. The reason, he has very political and military control of the country. And also, he has international influence with nations like China, like Russia, like Turkey, and a bunch of left-leaning governments in Latin America. That's the reason why Maduro is in power, not for the sanctions. But on some political, they give him an excuse to a bad economic performance. Professor Hanke also gave his take on the oil economy. And of course, the situation the past decade regarding the Venezuelan oil production is awful, it's dreadful. Venezuela, just a decade ago, produced around 3 million barrels of crude oil per day and exported over 2 million of those barrels, and over 1 million was exported to the United States. Now, this production has diminished 75%. It reached the bottom on 2020 during, of course, COVID. At the moment, went to only 400,000 barrels per day. And the past year or so, we had a oil production close to between 700 and 800,000 barrels of crude oil per day. Most of that oil is exported. However, since this year, late 2022 and early 2023, Venezuela is exporting back again crude oil to the United States. Apparently, the Biden administration gives some sort of waiver, and actually Venezuela is back again on this U.S. public agency list of U.S. trade partners and also trade balance with the United States. So Venezuela is yet again on the list of commercial U.S. partners and also oil suppliers to the United States. So keep that in mind. And what Professor Hanke is establishing is that Venezuela has the largest oil reserves in the world, more than Russia, Saudi Arabia, you name it, also Canada, and he wants to increase the depletion rate of such reserves in order to be valuable, because, and I agree with this take of Professor Hanke, is that the oil is not valuable unless it's produced. So very good with that, and he wants to increase the depletion rate. Also, he wants to privatize PDVSA. PDVSA is the state-owned oil company. It's a juggernaut, but it's been decimated by corruption and politics and such. And I will agree on selling PDVSA to the highest bidder. I will agree with that. But the most important thing is making the legal framework, creating the legal framework in order to somehow privatize the oil industry within Venezuela. That will be more important than just privatizing PDVSA, and PDVSA just can shrink in size, be more efficient, it could be less expensive to run, and just keep PDVSA. That's just my take, no professor's take. Keep PDVSA and keep a state-owned company, but reducing drastically its size and just keep it in like administration office for the oil industry in Venezuela. That will be my take, not the Professor Hanke's take. But still, I agree. I actually very agree, like 99% agree with Professor Hanke's take on the Venezuelan oil economy. Now, I want to close the video explaining why this thing is not going to happen, at least with Steve Hanke. First, he's being hired by this presidential pre-candidate Roberto Enriquez, that is from COPEC. First, he's not going to win. He's not going to be a president in Venezuela. Not him, not anyone from his political party. That's one thing. The second thing is the politics in Venezuela are kind of just a show, it's a circus, and most likely the Chavismo and Maduro are going to be in power from the next 10 years or so. So if you're betting doing anything on Venezuela and you are doing some strategic planning, do it on the case that Maduro is going to stay in power and the Chavismo are going to stay in power at least on the next decade. So I'm not saying that's what I want, I'm saying it is what it is. So I'm doing my strategic planning on that, and you should do the same thing if you have a remote chance of doing anything in Venezuela on the near future. So Professor Hanke's projects and takes, I agree with most of them, not all of them, and I have a lot of respect for Professor Hanke. However, his candidate is not going to reach the Palacio de Miraflores, the Venezuelan equivalent of the White House. He's not going to be president. So the only way that his project, his economic plans, are due to be implemented in Venezuela is with Maduro in power. So Maduro will have to hire Professor Hanke, and I'm not seeing that happening anytime soon. So still, good food for thought with regarding the Venezuelan economy for today. Thank you for watching Venezuela Insider. Please like, share, and subscribe. Follow us on social media. If you want to work with us, venezuelainsider.com. Thanks again and have a nice day.